to take on UCLA since 1968. Our first road show of the year. Brian Tripp and former Nittany Lion greats Christian Hackenberg and Jason Kabinda. Great to be with you. Penn State looks to bounce back from last week's hard-fought, tough loss in double overtime to Oregon in the whiteout game and on the road against a struggling 0-4 UCLA football team today at the Rose Bowl. Jason Kabinda is on site, and Jason, there's nothing like sunny Southern California. I think the skies are starting to clear at the Rose Bowl this morning.
Skies are clearing up. It should warm up to around 70 or 75 degrees. It is a beautiful day for a great football game in the Big Ten Conference.
Yeah, Christian, really important for Penn State to lift it.
I was saying I wasn't quite as lucky. I didn't get the call. I'm sitting at home in New Jersey. Got to get it up on the big screen here and figure it out. But sorry to cut you off, Trip.
No, sorry. We'll get all the things figured out here. Our first road show of the year. I'm actually in Tempe, Arizona. Penn State had a season-opening hockey win last night, 6-3 over Arizona State. We've got a couple of highlights from that game. Gavin McKenna, the highly touted prospect, making his much-anticipated debut last night for the Nittany Lions, factored in on both of Penn State's first-period goals. They took a 2-0 lead, primary assists from the phenom McKenna on Penn State's first two goals of the game. Arizona State then would rally, take a 3-2 lead into the third period, but then Penn State 4 unanswered goals in that third period, propelled by a Matt DeMarsico hat trick on the road. Penn State defeats 14th ranked Arizona State. So that's where I am today to play game 2 of that series tonight. But a big win for a team with national championship aspirations last night down here in the desert. And speaking of the desert, the national championship being played this year, the Frozen Four, in Las Vegas, just a couple of hours up the road here from Phoenix. So we're all in different time zones. We're getting ready for a football game today. But the big thing is, as I just touched on, bouncing back for this Penn State football team. They need to find a way against UCLA to get back on track and really live that 1-0 mantra, Christian, here today as they had a look. Everyone knows what happened last week. It's a 3-0 ball game, then 3-3. Oregon finally goes ahead. Third quarter, fourth quarter, Penn State finds a way to get it to overtime, take the lead in overtime, have opportunities against Oregon in that whiteout game, but ultimately in the end fall 30-24. This is a big opportunity for them to bounce back now today.
Yeah, it's so tough, I think, in today's day and age and instant gratification. I think college football is falling more into that NFL model where it truly is a week-to-week league, and everything gets slightly more magnified. And, it's very, very important to have a great cultural background to fall on and a cultural foundation. I think Coach Franklin, the stability he's provided since he's got here in 2014 has been really, really good. And we'll see how strong that is, I think, today, once the ball gets kicked off, how these guys react and what the ultimate temperament is of this football program inside the building, because at the end of the day, that's really all that matters.
I think it's tough. We obviously have a lot of expectations on this team. The number 2 team in the AP poll beginning of the season. Drew Allar being the prospect that he is, a lot of guys coming back. There's a lot of expectations to deal with. I think it's just time to flip the page. Obviously, the reality is everything is still in front of us this year. And I know, for the past couple of years, after some tough losses, we've said that same thing. But it's just the truth. Everything is still ahead of us as a team that is still growing in chemistry, still continuing to get better as every other team is trying to accomplish here. And hopefully Penn State can continue to grow that synergy and become a better football team week in and week out.
Yeah, in this new era of college football, we saw it last year with Ohio State. Penn State's kind of leaning on that model. A 12-team playoff, you're allowed to have a hiccup or two along the way as long as you're playing your best football when you get to the end of a college football season. We're going to dive into last week's game against Oregon, preview this game against UCLA, but you're going to hit some adversity throughout the course of the year, and that adversity struck again this week. Penn State linebacker Tony Rojas announced out with a long-term injury, and that's already what was a thin linebacker position for Penn State. So now they're forced to move forward without one of their better players on defense the rest of the way. Rojas battled an injury last year, and you can still see that he had a productive 2024 season, but what he's done this year with Amari Campbell at linebacker and what those linebackers do in the Jim Knowles defense, already 25 tackles, second on the team, tackles for loss, 2 sacks, pass breakup, really good in coverage. He runs a 4.4. You don't just replace that. Dom DeLuca will be the first guy to get a crack at it today, but increased reps as well for Keon Wiley. Younger guys, Alex Tash, who's played in just 1 game this year, and Cam Smith also expected to get some opportunities here. And Jason, as a linebacker, right, this is a guy who's had a great start to the season, and it's just another significant blow to this Penn State defense and adversity for this team to handle as they come out of the tough whiteout loss. And now you're without one of your best players for the foreseeable future and in all likelihood the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's definitely a shame to have a guy of Tony Rojas' magnitude. We know what he means to this defense. You know, him and Amari, their synergy, their chemistry was continuing to grow. I thought, you know, we really saw them play their best game together last week against Oregon. So it's a tough blow, especially for a room that is dying for a couple of guys to step up, and now they've been, you know, forced into that position. Obviously, we know a guy like Dom DeLuca is going to be able to step in, and we've seen him make a lot of plays and flash a lot over the last couple of years. But a lot of that onus is going to be on him and Amari now, continuing that LBU tradition and making sure that that room is playing at a high level.
Let's take a look at what is coming up on today's show. We'll talk more about that as well. But here's what's coming up on our Penn State football pregame show, presented by Modelo, ahead of the Nittany Lions and UCLA. Big Ten game number 2 on the air. James Franklin on the 1-0 mentality that you need to have now. Obviously, break down UCLA, and then questions and answers with those handsome fellas right there in that graphic. That's the first time I've seen Christian in a suit in a long time there. That's all coming up here on today's show. I don't know where they stole that graphic from, Christian. When's the last time you wore a suit?
That's AI generated. My wife only gets to see it maybe 2 or 3 times a year. That's it, man.
Yeah, that's a good one, but we'll get to that all coming up. But let's get back to the big discussion point. It's been the discussion all week long in this new era of college football and a 12-team playoff. Penn State loses to Oregon. We said it's not a season-defining moment. It certainly impacts the margin for error moving forward the rest of the way. But, Christian, you already touched on it a little bit. Now it's about how you move forward, learn those lessons, come out and play against UCLA today and bounce back. You cannot allow that one game to define your season. If you do, that's where that loss really hurts you. If you don't, you just have to look at it as a stumbling block along the road.
Yeah, I think one of the things we laid out was just how awesome this schedule and this season has been for Penn State to really take advantage of a lot of these opportunities. And unfortunately, last week we didn't. And you're going to have kind of this somber October here where we don't have much to look forward to. And then we really have what's turning out to be an even bigger stretch in November than what we probably anticipated, with Indiana playing really well, Nebraska playing really well, and even Michigan State. So it's just one of those things where we didn't make it easier on ourselves. We had a great chance to take advantage of a change in narrative that's been around this program for a very long time. And as Coach Franklin said, something that is factual in terms of being able to get over that hump and beat these top ranked opponents. But again, you know, it's the glass half full, glass half empty. And I know we have folks in the fan base who are on both sides of the coin, but the reality of the situation is the ball is going to get kicked off again next weekend, and you can either, you know, walk into it with a sourpuss, or you can pull yourself together, pull your pants up, go to work. And I think that this team has a great opportunity to do that. They're just going to have to wait a little bit longer now to really prove who they are against an opponent that was ultimately going to try to be where they are at the end of the year as well. So unfortunate miss, but great opportunity here on 3:30 out there Pacific or Eastern time, 12:30 Pacific. So
Jason, here's that schedule that Christian was talking about at UCLA today and then against Northwestern, 2 teams who have just really struggled to start the year. Then you go on the road to Iowa. You have the bye week, then at Ohio State, Indiana, at Michigan State, Nebraska, and Rutgers to wrap this thing up. So there's a lot of football to be played. But obviously some things to learn from a tough loss last week at home against Oregon.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I think, you know, I think this Oregon loss is going to serve us dividends at the end of the day. You know, I think adversity is always good. It reveals character. It helps you grow. And really, there's 3 or 4 more games on this schedule that I think are not going to be easy ones. I mean, even the Iowa game Kinnick. I remember my experience playing at Kinnick. I think that was one of the most hostile environments in the Big Ten that I ever played in my career at Penn State. So that's definitely a game to watch out on. And Christian spoke on, an Indiana team that's playing really well. Obviously, Ohio State, we know what they are and who they are. And that's a big hump that we've been trying to get over for years. And then obviously the Nebraska game at the end as well. So plenty of good competition left, plenty of good tests and adversity to go through for this team to go through and to grow and get better. And I'm really looking forward to see it unfold for the rest of the season.
Let's take a closer look at last week's game. I think afterwards, everyone's got this narrative about the game, but really they go toe-to-toe with what is now the number 2 team in the country. Obviously, you want to win the game. First, my takeaways, and then we'll get your reaction to this. The positives. Defense played outstanding. They were just on the field for way too long. So by the time you got to late third quarter, fourth quarter, they got worn down. They were gassed there, and they couldn't get that one key play after taking the lead in that first overtime to get off the field and secure the win. So the defense, outstanding last week. Offensively, you found a way in the fourth quarter to get on track and come from behind. Look, we'll look at the numbers here in just a moment for Drew Aller. He did not play his best game last week, but still, when push came to shove at the end of the game, with his ability to run the football, make a few big throws, they showed that mental toughness and fortitude you want to see from a veteran group to come from behind despite not playing good football and only having 3 first downs in the first half to get points on the board, ultimately tie it in a clutch situation, force overtime, take the lead in overtime. And Devontae Ross, another big game for him. He has the 2 touchdowns in that fourth quarter, bring Penn State from behind. Ultimately, you need to play 60-plus minutes of more consistent football, but there were some positives, Christian, last week. It's about how do you put it all together over the course of a game. There's so many different directions we can go with Penn State. You're our quarterback. Let's start with the guy everyone's talking about this week, and Drew Aller.
Yeah, I think, listen, by no stretch of the imagination did he play well. I thought he missed some opportunities early that he could have taken advantage of. And then to your point, he did turn it on and make some plays, which was a good sign. But it was at that point, I think, too little, too late. From a bigger picture standpoint, and you hit on it, we played arguably the worst game we could have played for 3.5 quarters offensively, and we were still in it with the number 2 team in the country. So that's the bright side. And that's where I think it feels a little bit different. I don't think we really gave that game up from a management standpoint, from any other standpoint other than the fact that we just did not flat out execute. And the fact that it still went into double overtime, I think is a testament to this football team. One of those things that I think Drew just has to continue to learn from. We talked about him not having a ton of opportunities to be the guy to go out and ultimately dictate whether or not you win or lose the football game. Showed some good stuff, but ultimately it wasn't enough. And when you have a senior quarterback who's played as much as he has and the expectations in college football today, he's got to be able to get it done in those moments. And, I said it earlier this week, my stomach flipped when I saw that interception because it's so uncharacteristic of him in those types of situations. And I'm just really pulling for him to be able to get his head right for the rest of the year. I said he should have thrown his phone out, went to Walmart, bought a burner with all that NIL money, put his girlfriend, his mom, and his dad's number in it, and that's all he talks to the rest of the season. So I'm very interested to see how his body language looks today. And then also how his play is. It's a great opportunity to go out against a team that's struggling, and Jason's going to get to some of those points and be able to really start shutting those narratives down around him.
Jason, they can help Drew out as well by being a lot better on first down in the run game.
Yeah, I think it starts there. I mean, we were just not on schedule a majority of that game. We've got to be better on first down. We've got to run the ball. We have the offensive line to do it. We just need to go out there and execute, be able to open up the play action through, get him in a comfortable rhythm and flow so that he can play and be the player that, we know that he is, more than capable of being. I think a saving grace is the fact that offense that we just faced in Oregon is probably the best offense we're going to face this year. Now, to be able to hold that team to 17 points in regulation, that tells me we have a defense we can truly rely on for the rest of this year. That is a great, great positive sign for this team. Now we just need to get the offense up to speed. And if we can get the offense playing at a level that is even near or around the level that the defense is playing in, we're going to be in a great, great spot as a team. we just got to see that growth, and hopefully throughout these next few games, that growth will start to show on the offensive side of the ball.
Christian, what do they change offensively? How do they go about getting in a better flow? What are some of the things schematically, touch wise? What are you seeing that they could adjust to help get into that consistent rhythm?
Yeah, I've been very vocal about it, just being more simple. Like keep it simple, stupid. Let's get to what we know we can execute. From the running game standpoint, it just still seemed like we were trying to attack edges all game last week, and to me, that plays right into Oregon's strength. They have two great defensive ends. They have a ton of speed in the second level and the third level. Um, I want us to really lean into that size offensively. And then subsequently, I think that kind of plays into Drew's skill set a little bit more, right? You get a downhill running game. Now you can start working Drew on play action. Now you can use Drew as a changeup in the run game, especially out of shotgun with his legs, or even as a sixth, getting that additional six blocker and having to account for him in the run game. But I really do think it's just a flow. It felt like they were calling plays a lot, and the timing wasn't really great until that fourth quarter. I mean, a small example is just our play action game. The first real shot we took, we had two great chances on first down, and then the second and 6, and then we go play action on 3rd and 4. It just didn't really flow. And I think that that's probably the bigger issue, is when you have such a plethora of options when you're staring at your call sheet. Sometimes it's a lot easier to kind of simplify it, marry all those concepts together, and really start weaving the game plan together. And that's just what I haven't seen yet from Coach K and this offense. So I think that when you have as much talent as they have, that's the best way to approach it, and then start adding wrinkles from there from a game plan standpoint.
Jason, from the defensive side right now, what would you do if you're a defensive coordinator against this Penn State offense? So what's the adjustment they have to make offensively? Put yourself as an opponent, put yourself as UCLA, as Northwestern, as Iowa the next 3 weeks until they show otherwise offensively. How are you scheming against them? What is it that makes them easy to defend right now and has prevented Penn State from being more efficient on the offensive side?
I mean, that's a great question, Brian, and I think it comes back to, Drew Aller is a very cerebral quarterback. He is great mentally. He's great pre-snap. He's great when it comes to diagnosing coverages and things of that nature. I just think that we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot when it comes to some of the motions and shifts and things of that nature. Me and Christian talked about this last week. When you have a cerebral quarterback like that, you'd like to be able to have him see a still picture at the end for at least 4 to 5 seconds before that snap happens. And I think right now, and a lot of this is operational. I played in Ben Johnson's offense when I was in Detroit. We had a ton of shifts and formations that Jared Goff had to handle pre-snap. But one thing that was such a point of emphasis for us offensively was getting out of the huddle and getting to the line very fast. Get the play called, get to the line, let Jared start. So that then by the time we've shifted or Amon-Ra has gone to the other side of the ball, whatever the case is, tight ends move to the other side, there's a still picture for Jared to look at the defense, see what they're and see what tells he was able to see based on those motions and those formation shifts, and then be able to execute the play. It just feels like too many times by the time we're done shifting and motioning guys, that Drew just doesn't have enough time to be who he is at his best. And we're kind of taking away from one of his strengths. You know what I mean? So that's kind of one of the things I would like to see change offensively for us. I think when Christian says make it simpler, it's not necessarily take the formations and the shifts and the things out of it. It's just that he needs to see a still picture for at least 4 to 5 seconds before we go and execute a play. And I just think that'll bring the execution level to a higher place.
Christian, I see you nodding your head. Your reaction to that, and it's something that I saw from the sidelines last week. Drew getting a little bit frustrated that operation wasn't a little quicker, allowing him to have that opportunity to really use one of his strengths out there. As a 3-year starter, that's the quarterback.
Yeah, it's funny. Every system attacks things differently, but at the end of the day, when you are a quarterback, I think like Drew, with the skill set he has, you want to be able to eliminate some things pre-snap. It's just impossible to see the entire field, and you spend so much time in coverage prep and just even like shapes, right? Like shapes of defense. Like, what does this mean? And just being able to pick up on those small cues helps you play faster. And when you watch Drew, especially early in that game, everything just seemed slightly off. He was in this shoulder as opposed to this shoulder, and it was just a half second late, and even some of the completions that he had. And to me, that's just a processing thing, and it's an awareness thing. And I always just loved being able to sit there, know what I was seeing, eliminate what I know is probably not going to be there, and start making the game simple and being able to stack wins. Um, and it's a great point. Like I'm not personally as much of a fan of all the shifts and motions as Coach K has. It's obviously part of his system and how he likes to see the game. But there's things that I think you need to do in order to not stuff a square peg into a round hole with your quarterback and give him a chance to see that still picture and then go out and operate. And if you got to do some stuff from there and make adjustments, by all means, go ahead, because that's why you're the offensive coordinator and getting paid what you get paid. But at this point in time, I think you really need to find a way to get Drew in rhythm. And the only thing that I can reasonably point a finger towards is let's simplify this picture for him a little bit more and get him playing faster.
Let's flip it to the defensive side of the football, and it was a defense for 3 quarters that was outstanding. Oregon with all of the time of possession and Penn State's inability to stay on the field, they just put the defense in a really tough spot. But overall, even with Deni Dennis Sutton getting mauled out there by the offensive line, how would you rate that Penn State defense and what they did last week against a very talented Oregon offense?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad you brought that up because obviously there's a bit of concerns from a production standpoint, from a number standpoint when it came to our defensive line. I think that in those 2 or 3, egregious missed penalty calls, maybe we get 2 or 3 sacks out of those plays. I do think that Dante was under some pressure. I thought we could have been better, especially in the interior of our defensive line. But overall, man, I thought the defense really did play well. I thought our DBs, man, played really well, challenging at the top of routes, getting hands on really shifty, talented receivers. Might be the best receiver group, that we see this year. So from that standpoint, I thought they did really well. I thought Amari and Tony played fast. I mean, they had a bunch of tackles. Amari was in the double digits. I believe Tony might have been as well. So I think the defense is operating really well. I think Coach Knowles called a great game. And like you said, they just ran out of gas. I mean, it's hard when you play 80 plays on defense. That's like a game and a half of plays, 80 plays. So that's tough, 40 in the first half. So I think whatever we can do to mitigate that and continue to play fast, continue to get fresh bodies out there is going to help. I think we're going to see a lot of rotation out there today against UCLA. We had no rotation at the safety position. Zaki and King Mack took each and every single snap at the safety. I'd like to see a little bit more, but Belgrave shorter and Dede Lane as well in there. But I think overall the defense is in really good shape, and I think they'll have a very strong showing against this UCLA team today.
Christian?
Yeah, I think to echo that, I think one of the things that Jason was pretty consistent on is just they played too much. It's a shame, the news with Tony at the top of the show, because I thought it was arguably the best game that duo played together. And now there's going to be some time in terms of meshing with that. From the secondary level, just another point I'd throw in there is I thought they were physical as all get out. There's a play A.J. Harris took on a pulling guard and snapped his head back, snapped his helmet back. It was pretty impressive. I'm not worried about the defense for a multitude of reasons. And it's funny because heading into the season, I slightly was, because they had to install a new concept and they had to get familiar with the personnel. And I thought this offense had a leg up. So it's a really weird position to be in right now as opposed to preseason looking at this. But by no stretch of the imagination am I worried about the defensive side of the ball. I think they're only going to continue to get more complex. I think they're only going to get more confident and competitive. And the offense just has to hold up their end of the bargain, because 80 plays is entirely too much, even with double overtime. And you saw it in that third and fourth quarter. A couple times I looked at Zane Durant, who's a guy who I think is in incredible shape and is an anchor on that defense. And Oregon was so downhill. He was taking on double teams all day. And it showed. You know, he was sitting there on field goal with his hands on his hips, really, really tired. So excited to see how these guys continue to develop.
And like the team, we have to turn the page as well. We look back at last week's matchup against Oregon, and we'll look ahead to the matchup today at UCLA at the Rose Bowl. Penn State's first trip to take on UCLA on the road since 1968, and the first time both teams are actually meeting in the Rose Bowl. Jason Kabinda is on site there. Christian Hackenberg, Brian Tripp. When we return, we'll have more of the Modelo Penn State football pregame show. Modelo, the official import beer partner of Penn State football. 21 plus, please drink responsibly. More coming up in just a moment here on the pregame show. We'll look ahead to today's matchup with UCLA when we come back.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.
We are going for all the marbles next year.
You know the history, and you have felt the roar. But now, you can relive it all.
I think he was looking for a good meal, Italian meal.
Welcome to the Vault on Roar Plus, where every unforgettable Penn State moment lives forever.
If you can get people to believe you're fair, I think that's the whole secret of coaching.
From black and white grit to high-def glory, the Vault is your front row seat to the moments that built this tradition and the ones that built you as a fan. It's not just history, it's Penn State history. And it's all right here at Roar Plus. The roar never stops.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.
Welcome back. We promised to look ahead to today's game against UCLA. It's coming up a 3:30 Eastern kickoff on CBS. Of course, you can listen to it as well on the Penn State Sports Network. Jason Kabinda filling in on the sidelines today and on the pregame with Steve Jacka and Roger. UCLA 0-4 on the year, the only team in the country that has not led at any point during this 2025 college football season. Before we get to the Bruins, though, let's take a look at one of our fan questions today. You saw those handsome gentlemen on the graphic when we ran through the things coming up on today's show. There they are again. All right, I like that. Whoever did that, kudos. Let's see our fan question here today, and it's about expectations. Jason, a comparison of where Penn State's rankings in their final AP position is with their recruiting rankings and the talent. Everyone can see the question on the screen. Jason, I'll let you dive into this here. It's a really good question, and I'm really curious to hear your reaction to it.
I think it's a great question. First of all, let me say that because these numbers weren't ones that I was necessarily super aware of, and when I saw it, it was just interesting to kind of dive into it and really think about it. But the reality is, the question is, should the expectations be adjusted? And as a competitor, as a guy who cares about nothing but winning championships, I think it would be doing us a disservice to change our expectations of who we want to be and what we want to accomplish at the end of each and every single season. I don't think there's any point in signing up and going out there and playing the games if you're not going out there to win them all and to win the biggest one, being the national championship. But I do think it's worth a discussion because, as you know, in the past year or two, Penn State has really done a good job of trying its best to continue to increase the NIL and the awareness around NIL and, the NIL initiatives and the organizations helping to fundraise and things of that nature. Because the reality is, we need to make this roster the best it possibly can be. We need the electric guys. We need the 5-star receivers and the best quarterback. And, that's what you need in order to win. That's the reality of the situation. So maybe does this graphic or this question maybe allow fans to breathe a little bit? That would be nice, But to adjust our expectations, I think would be taking it too far. I don't think we can do that. But I think for the sake of the fans, for the sake of the outrage and things of that nature, I think it's good to have a reality check and to see where we are from a roster standpoint. Christian, I'd love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, listen, I figures lie and liars figure. I'm not a big numbers and data guy. I think you can skew them to drive any narrative. I mean, think back to the papers we had to write in college, Jason. You're scrambling through Wikipedia trying to figure out something. So I think it's available, right? But to that point, I just feel like, and I'd be curious to see the margin of error or the margin of difference between some of these programs, and I peel it back to more of reality and try to put myself in the situation of all of these kids that are getting recruited. Do you value a Penn State offer as much as you value an Oregon offer? Do you value an Alabama offer as much as you value a Penn State offer in Ohio State? And I think the answer to that's 100% yes, because subsequently when you look at all of these top recruits, this logo happens to be in a lot of their top fives, top sevens, top sevens, top tens, whatever it may be. So at the end of the day, I think it is a good point to bring up. I think it's a valid argument, but I don't buy it because for me, you're competing for the same people, right? And it would be a completely different narrative had we had a little bit more success against some of these top teams. I don't think it would even be a point of contention here. But to put it completely on just this talent growth or whatever, or talent gap, I think is not fair. I think ultimately it just comes down to the expectations as this question was pertaining to, and the expectations should not change. You have to be able to get over that hump eventually. And, again, another missed opportunity, but you got to keep swinging. You can't lay down and roll over.
And that starts today, and no team, probably no program, has developed talent the way you look at what Penn State has done, churning out NFL talent. James Franklin, his staff, the strength and conditioning staff led by Chuck Losey, have done an unbelievable job at developing and cultivating that talent that they have as well. It's a great question, a great discussion. We appreciate it. You can ask your questions on social media, X or Instagram throughout the course of the week. You can also drop them in the chat on Roar Plus if you're watching us on Roar Plus today. So let's get to the matter at today's game against UCLA and an opportunity to bounce back. And this is where it is not cliche. This is where that 1-0 mentality really kicks in for this football team now in a 12-team playoff model in this new era of college football. With Jim Knowles, his experience last year at Ohio State, they lost 2 games. They lost to Oregon and Michigan. The sky was falling in Columbus, and they won the national championship a year ago. So James Franklin talking with Steve Jones ahead of today's radio pregame show about that 1-0 mentality that it takes to bounce back, and it all starts today against the Bruins.
The 1-0 mentality, the culture of the program, when you get to weeks like these, how important is that routine and that culture being ingrained in them?
Yeah, I think it's really important every week, but to your point, it's magnified in weeks like this where, you could lose focus through frustration or disappointment, and the reality is there's no time for that. We got to move on to the next task at hand. Going on the road to UCLA, obviously some travel things that we got to make sure that we're straight on as well, so that's not a distraction. Handled it really well last time we went to USC, and get back on a positive roll.
Jason, you're with the team out there in Los Angeles taking on UCLA in Pasadena today at the Rose Bowl. How is their mindset? What does it take as a player to bounce back after a tough setback like you had last week?
Yeah, I was able to be at practice yesterday and just watch the demeanor of the players, watch the attitude of the players, and I saw extreme focus. That Friday practice before a game, it's so much about being on point, everybody understanding their alignment, their assignment, going through all the procedural things. And sometimes a lot of the procedures are situations that don't come up often in games, but when they do, they really, really matter. And I think on those Friday practices, if you're not locked in, it's easy to miss a couple things because it's not a situation that comes up often. It's easy to be a backup on kickoff, and when they call for backup kickoff, you're not locked in and you don't run out there, but none of those issues came up. I mean, they called for backups. Everybody was locked in. They made exchanges. The situations were called. Each team had 11 on both sides of the ball. There weren't any 12 men on the field or guys confused. I just see a team who's very focused and a team, quite frankly, is ready to go out there and kick some butt and leave a good taste in their mouth compared to what they had last week.
Christian, you lost to Oregon last week. That's one game. You can't allow one loss to become two losses. You have to learn from that experience in this current era of college football. Again, you just have to put it behind you now.
It's a maturity thing, right? And I think that's one of the things that we talked about on the pregame show last week heading into the Oregon matchup, paying dividends. And I think ultimately it did, especially in those situations towards the end of the game. You're down 17-3. Do you have a mature football team that can come back and swing? And they showed a lot of those things. Today's another great example of that. Do they come out and do they look crisp? Do they look clean, or is there a little bit of a hangover? I expect it to look that way, as Jason described, a very focused, hungry, angry football team, but angry in the right ways. Angry to continue to just shut out the noise and quell the noise with the next opportunity at hand, which, granted, isn't in Ohio State or somebody of the same stature as Oregon. So there's going to be a little bit of a slow burn here, but again, kind of the one thing we talked about culturally, Coach Franklin in that interview with Steve talking about the 1-0 mentality, how much has that infiltrated that locker room, especially with all the shifts and changes and new personalities and transfer portal and all these things that they have to deal with. I think that's a testament to a program that can compete for a really long time. So very, very excited to see where these guys end up at the end of the day today, and ultimately what the vibe is surrounding the program all over social media and through the talking heads afterwards.
Yeah, that's us. We're the talking heads. You got to tune us out. You got to get ready to play. They already had to have flipped the page to UCLA, or you won't like the result this week. So speaking of a who's who, I don't know if you've ever played Guess Who, but that's kind of what the UCLA coaching staff has going on right now. Tim Skipper's in his second game as interim head coach, replacing Deshaun Foster, who was relieved of his duties already this season. Then this week, you thought, okay, at least you know who the offensive coordinator is going to be. But Tino Sinceri, midweek, former Pitt standout who was at Indiana last year, he's replaced at offensive coordinator by Jerry Neuheisel, the son of Rick Neuheisel. And he's been at UCLA for a while. Kevin Coyle's the defensive coordinator. He was an analyst to start the year. It's a UCLA program that has really struggled. And when you start to dive into their offense first, they're averaging 321 yards per game. They've been really bad on third downs. They only have 5 offensive touchdowns all year. They haven't scored a point in the first quarter this season, but the guy who's been the talk of college football's off season, and we've practiced it all week long. Nico oh no, this is not good, guys. This is not good. Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback for UCLA, who will now be known as Nico for the rest of the show, is a really talented quarterback. He's the team's leading rusher. Everything that they do offensively goes through him, Christian.
Yeah, Nico, I like how you said his last name better than I would have based upon the offseason antics. But, yeah, everything goes through him. It's a very tough situation to be in. Not going to really compare it to maybe a situation I was in at one point in time in my career, but it is very hard to be that guy. But, again, with great power comes great responsibility. And when you sit here and watch this kid play, very, very dynamic thrower of the football. You saw that at Tennessee last year under Heupel's system. But they have to get a little creative. They got to move the pocket for him. They got to scheme up ways to get guys open and be able to take advantage of it. Competitor, love his competitive nature up into this point in that situation, especially last week. But at the end of the day, if Penn State wants to have something they have to focus on throughout this game, it's going to be to stifle this kid and slow him down. And he's also a guy who can hurt you with his legs, similar to Dante Moore. You see a great example of that here, stepping up in the pocket. So rush lanes, another crack at being able to make sure that we're detail-oriented there. It's going to be a great opportunity. But despite all the noise, despite all of the things that have been around Nico and this program up until this point, he is still the bright, shining light for the UCLA Bruins. I think ultimately any type of production is going to come through either his legs or his arm today. And he's the focal point, I think, for this Penn State team heading into the Rose Bowl today.
Yeah, Quasi Gilmer, wide receiver, had 19 receptions on the season. He had a touchdown last week. Northwestern, the opponent for the Bruins last week. UCLA was down 17-0. They did rally. They got back in the game 17-14, the final score, and their offense was able to bring them back in the football game. Let's look at Nico's numbers here on the season. Christian was talking about him. He's a guy that has talent. There's no question about that. He's been the team's leading rusher in 3 of his first 4 games. And anytime you have a mobile quarterback, Jason, that certainly does create some problems for a defense, and Penn State's dealt with that throughout the course of the year so far.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy feat to deal with a running quarterback or a guy who has that ability, which Nico has. I think he is a thrower of the football first before he looks to run, but that ability is there, which obviously brings another element that you have to be wary of defensively. And speaking of defense, this UCLA defense ranks towards the bottom of the Big Ten. I kind of want to dive in to a few plays here. You're going to see a screen at the bottom of the screen to the running back here, and just there's a lot of poor tackling on this team, a lot of bad angles. This UCLA team isn't necessarily about what they do; it's about how they do it, and they're just not doing it very well. You see another one breaks a ton of tackles, a bad angle by that safety there, and it's really been the story all of this season. Play number 2 here, I got an inside zone with a wide B gap over at the top, and this team struggles with eye candy, which I think is going to help us because obviously Andy Kotelnicki's offense has a ton of eye candy in it. They struggle with motions and shifts and having good eye discipline and things of that nature. You're going to see a wham play here. This tight end at the bottom of the screen is going to seal off that one technique, and this running back is going to go right out the back door. Watch this DB at the bottom of the screen, too. I mean, you see footing issues. You see angle issues. He slips there, misses a tackle, and one is off to the races there. It's been all over the tape. You see play action against cover 2 here. You see those 2 receivers at the top of the screen run deep routes. That quarterback should be sinking unless there is a flat threat, and there is none here. He doesn't sink back enough. He hits that corner route right behind him. A ton of issues on this UCLA defense. I think that the offense should be able to take advantage of this team, the poor tackling, the bad fundamentals that they display. I think that the Penn State offense should have a field day today.
And we talked about Penn State's offense and struggling. There's 2 areas, right? Running game, early, first down, staying on schedule. Well, UCLA's defense allowing 233 rush yards per game this season. They've been bad against the run. And because of that, they've been bad on third downs. Opponents converting 58% of their third downs against UCLA this year, and 75% of their fourth down opportunities is a defense that has really, really struggled to get off the field. And if you look at the UCLA schedule so far this year, it has been tough sledding this season for the Bruins as you take a look at their schedule through the first 4 games. Utah, UNLV, New Mexico, Northwestern. They were in that game last week against the Wildcats. Probably their best performance of the year. It was a defensive slugfest on the lake. Their linebackers, Chisholm and Vaughn's, are not bad. Got a good kicker. It's a team with 59 newcomers this season, 37 transfers, and 22 true freshmen. And that's kind of showed up for them with all the coaching changes and the instability. This is the type of team, Christian, right? You want to see on your schedule the week after a hard-fought, difficult loss in a big game last week.
Without a doubt. It's going to be, we kind of portrayed the first 3 games of the season as a preseason type feel. If you're going to have a get back game or a game just to kind of get you back into the flow, you have a lot of things headed in your direction, a lot of areas, as you highlighted, that we need to improve on that are going to be much easier to expose against this team. So you're going to be able, if you go out there and put a strong performance together, to really quiet that outside noise, which I think is got to be Penn State's main focus here until they head, I guess you could argue maybe to Kinnick against Iowa, but realistically when you head to the Shoe on November 1st.
Still have to play to your standard. You have to do it for 60 minutes no matter who is on the other side. People are going to be measuring Penn State by how they look today, not so much what the final score is and what the opponent does. We have time for one more of our fan questions. Let's put it up. We'll let Jason handle this one again. And here is our second fan question today. Again, you can submit your questions throughout the week. There we are, Brian Tripp, Christian Hackenberg, Jason Kabinda, the always dapper Jason Kabinda. And our question today about how James Franklin and the team typically react. We're talking about that 1-0 mindset throughout the show. And Jason, we'll let you kind of run with this one here again.
I think Coach Franklin does such a good job of keeping the team together, making sure we're not pointing fingers, and that at the very end of the day, a finger is being pointed, point it back at yourself. He's a great coach at making you look in the mirror and making you think to yourself, what could I have done better to produce a better result? And then what could I have done throughout the week? What could I have done on Tuesday, on Wednesday to prepare myself better? Should I have been watching film more? Should have been making sure I was in better shape? Picking certain emphasis at certain points throughout the week to focus on that are going to better you and ultimately better the team. So I think that's one thing Coach Franklin does so well, is just keeping the team together, continuing to keep the main thing, and there not being any drama. It's a very selfless team. It's a very selfless atmosphere to be a part of Coach Franklin's organization, and I know those guys are taking that mindset into today's game.
Let's wrap this thing up today with one big thing that you're looking for, what you want to see. Christian, what's the one thing, most important thing for this Penn State football team today on the road against UCLA?
Yeah, I'm obviously going to head to the offensive side of the ball. I want to see him be a process-oriented offense as opposed to a results-oriented offense. The results will come if the process is tight. I think that the coaching staff can do some things to make sure that the guys can operate at a high level. I want to see Drew get in rhythm early, but ultimately you have to feel good coming out of this game today. If there's any trepidation, any glaring point of inefficiency, it's going to just continue to grow and fester like an open wound. And these guys really, really need to get lost in the process and let the results take care of themselves.
Jason, you'll have the best vantage point today on the sideline.
Yeah, no doubt. I think for me, the biggest thing I want to see, I'm going to head to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, with Tony Rojas's departure, I want to see what Dom DeLuca's snap count looks like. Obviously, we're going to be depending on him and Amari a ton. I want to see how he does with that increased usage, how his production looks, how fluid him and Amari look from a communication standpoint, from an operational standpoint together, as well as hopefully if this game is what we think it's going to be. I want to see what that depth behind those two guys look like and how far along are these guys, because there's a good chance that at some point this year we're going to have to depend on them to win us some football games.
Yeah, first crack on that depth side, Alex Tash, Cam Smith, Keon Wiley, maybe Dakari Nelson in there for Penn State, but that's a big loss. As we touched on at the top of the show, Tony Rojas announced this week that he's out with a long-term injury. For me, I want to see on the offensive side some more explosive plays. I think you have the talent to do it. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen against this porous UCLA run defense, but I wouldn't mind seeing a few more touches for Devontae Ross, getting him the ball wherever he may line up, if it's in that backfield jet sweep motion, some of the little short stuff that they can do to him. We're trying to stretch the field with Devontae Ross every time he's touched the ball early this season. Remember, he dealt with a nagging injury throughout camp, but as he gets healthy, it looks like he is a guy that can really be a factor and help take that top off and maybe relieve a little pressure for the rest of the Penn State offense. Well, our first road show of the year, Jason Kabinda, huge shoes to fill in today on the sidelines. On the radio side, Christian Hackenberg, Brian Tripp, thanks for tuning in. Enjoy an ice-cold Modelo watching from home during today's game. Modelo, the official import beer partner of Penn State football. For Christian, Jason, Victor, our entire team, Brian Tripp saying so long. Enjoy the game today, and thanks for tuning in to the Modelo Penn State football pregame show. We'll talk to you back outside the BJC next week when Penn State entertains Northwestern for homecoming at Beaver Stadium. Enjoy the game today. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.
We are going for all the marbles next year.
You know the history, and you have felt the roar. But now, you can relive it all.
I think he was looking for a good meal, Italian meal.
Welcome to the Vault on Roar Plus, where every unforgettable Penn State moment lives forever.
If you can get people to believe you're fair, I think that's the whole secret of coaching.
From black and white grit to high-def glory, the Vault is your front row seat to the moments that built this tradition and the ones that built you as a fan. It's not just history, it's Penn State history. And it's all right here at Roar Plus. The roar never stops.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste. A reward for those with a fighting spirit. You've earned this, so hold it up high. Modelo, the mark of a fighter.